I'm Sara Parks from the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at the University of Nottingham. And joining me today is my colleague, Tom O'Loughlin, who's going to talk about what a gospel is.
I know it seems such an obvious question, doesn't it? You know, you pick up a copy of the New Testament, you got four of them. But the interesting thing about the word gospel is that it's originally a political word in the Greek world. It's a political word insofar as it is a gift of the emperor to a city. And the city has the emperor's gospel, which was actually some sort of plaque which they would have placed in their temple. And it was the assurance of the goodwill of the emperor. It quite literally was a security pact. The city gave loyalty and taxes to the emperor. In exchange, the emperor gave favour and goodwill to the city, gave it rights, and gave it protection. So at some very early date after the time of Jesus, but before Paul starts preaching, there was some genius follower of Jesus, whose name doesn't come down to us, who realized that a word like covenant, if you went out and talked about a covenant, if you were talking to Greek-speaking Jews, they automatically knew what it meant. Mm-hmm. But if you were talking to anyone who wasn't of Jewish background, covenant was just no more than a will, a last will and testament. And he needed a single word that he could use in a Gentile context that would capture the big idea. Mm-hmm. And he made this tremendous leap of imagination and said, we have a gospel. God has sent us a gospel. And so a political idea of the emperor to a city becomes a metaphor for a relationship of God to this group of followers. God has sent us a gospel. And then there's an evolution of the idea so that the gospel becomes almost equivalent to Jesus. Jesus is the gospel. Mm-hmm. And then once you have the idea of Jesus is the gospel, then you've got to remember that. So you perform the gospel. Just as a city was proud to recall the fact that it had an imperial gospel, the Christian community, or the followers of Jesus, they performed this memory that they had a gospel. So from political to religious metaphor, to metaphor for Jesus, to the idea that you have to perform the gospel. And performing the gospel required story and the storyteller. And we know that there were lots of teachers, there were lots of storytellers, there were lots of preachers, there were exorcists, there were prophets. But clearly at some stage there was someone, the people who were performing Q, it becomes the people who are performing Q, and then later named people like Mark and Matthew and Luke. They're giving performances of the gospel. Mm-hmm. So I think the move is from the gospel to the gospelers. You go from evangelion to evangelist.
Yeah.
And so there was the gospel, then the performing of the gospel, then you move to the evangelists. And evangelists are moving around just like all the other Christian teachers, but unlike some Christian teachers, they can give you this particular type of performance. It's a performance that goes through the sayings and memory of Jesus, how they were remembering and what Jesus meant to them. And then once they once those performances had become frozen in text, written on wax tablets and then on papyrus, now the Gospeler's tale became the Gospels.
A literary genre.
A literary genre.
Mhm.
So, I think we hear the word Gospels, we need to start with politics, then remember this brilliant, unnamed theologian who made this brilliant leap of imagination. He didn't pick a Hebrew word or twist a Hebrew word. He takes a completely political word and gives it this completely new meaning. And then we go to Jesus is the gospel, to remembering the Gospels, to performing the Gospels, to Gospelers, and from Gospelers to Gospel. I don't know whether that makes sense, but that's the sequence as I see it.
Yes, thank you. I haven't quite heard it put that way before, but it makes beautiful sense. I would offer that maybe Jesus himself had something to do with that genius move, rhetorical move, because whoever set down his sayings in Greek uses the word basileia all the time, the basileia of God, which is the same word used for the Roman Empire. So there's an alternative to Rome going on at a very early stage.
And there's an alternative to the emperor.
Yes, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Sarah.